Hi, I'm going to take you through my method of creating these little brass capped steel rivets. Now you find these on historical pieces of armour throughout the centuries, doing anything from holding linings in to doing articulation to purely decorative effects. So if you see a brass rivet on a piece of armour, it doesn't always mean that it's a solid brass rivet. Could be one of these. Now I'm going to take you through all the bits and pieces that I need to do the job, and then we'll make a start. The thing we're going to need is some brass. Now here's some offcuts from some brass edging that I've been doing. It's 0.9 millimeters thick. You don't really want to go any thicker than that. You can go thinner, but I found that a 0.9 millimeter is just about perfect for this job. I've got a nice cheap punch here. Now for this, I've got a nice cheap punch here. Now for these, I'm going to be using this size here, 9/32 or 7.14 millimeters. That's going to be the circumference we're going to cut. Now we've obviously got some solder. This is solid solder. There's no flux core in here, so we need some flux. Now this is your standard tub of DIY shop plumber's flux. Now when using this, I've also found that it's not quite aggressive enough. So I've got a little tub here. I use that as well. And that just makes your flux slightly more aggressive and makes it more likely to attach onto the steel rivets. Now, of course, the 1/8 steel rivets, they're an important part of this, obviously. Some sandpaper to roughen up the face of those rivets, long nose pliers. Now here I've got an old iron stand, and you can see I've put a small dimple into the middle of it there. That helps secure the cap in place whilst I muck around with the rivets. We've got a heat source. Now you can get these from DIY shops or even a cooking shop for doing your creme brulee. That's enough heat to solder these rivets in. Obviously side cutters, and another important thing I use is a little water spray bottle. That speeds up the whole process. So with all these things, let's make a start. Right, I've secured my large rivet stamp in the vise here. What I need to do is take my piece of brass, pop it on top of that, my punch, and then give it a good couple of blows. And as you can see, that produces a small dimple in the surface. Now I'm going to continue on all the way around the edge. And there we go. The next stage is to punch all these dimples out. Now I've secured my punch into the vise here, and I'm going to get each of these dimples and pop it into the lower and punch. And we'll carry on until they're all done. And there we go. A nice little handful of individual brass domes. Next stage is the soldering. Right, here we go. The first thing we do is we select our single little cap and pop it there in the center. Now the solder, we only need a really small amount. So I'm just going to snip a tiny little block off. Let's see if I can show that to you. That's it. That's as much as we need. And that pops down into the cap. Next thing we need to do is we need to clean up the top of that rivet. And that will help the solder key onto the surface. Now the next thing, of course, is the flux. Really small amount of flux on there, and then touch it. There we go. That's it. Now into the long nose pliers and pop it down onto the solder. Get some heat and heat up the rivet until that solder melts. And the rivet slowly sinks down into the cup. This is where the water comes in. Little spray, cools down the rivet quickly and fixes it. So that's it. That cap is now solidly fixed onto the surface. Now I'll see if I can do a little close-up here. Right, so we start out with the cap. Tiny amount of solder dropped into the top. Score up the head of that rivet. A little bit of soft flux. Little dip into the brazing flux. Hold it in place and apply some heat. Quick spray of water to cool it down, and there we go. Now that's ready for polishing and fitting. Hopefully that's a help to some of you. If you've got any comments, stick them down below, and I'll try and answer them. Thanks.